Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we conceived? Either way, we got what we needed.
Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman. We're back for our 62nd Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We are 1 week away from our national roundtable on progressive politics and justice. I want to welcome my listeners at the Progressive Radio Network at the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness Show. We are thrilled to have you on with us. We'll be going the usual 2 hours today. The last 20 minutes or so are not recorded. Actually, the last hour and 20 minutes did not come to you through PRN. So if you get to the top of the hour and we disappear on you, go to Grassroots Emergency Election Protection. Well, actually, go to electionprotection2024.org and get the link, Grassroots Emergency. I'll get it here, electionprotection2024.org, and grab the link and you can listen to the rest. We are recorded for an hour and a half, and then we turn off the recording. During the recording time, we do not use those 7 deadly words that George Carlin laid out for us. But after we take down the recording, you can say everything you want. We're at 53 listeners. We are glad to see everybody. We have an action-packed agenda as always. We're going to start with Joel Siegel telling us the status of the 2 major federal bills that we're hoping for the People Act, which was H.R. 1, and the John Lewis Act, which has been H.R. 4. And we're also going to talk about the Infrastructure Act. We have Diane D'Arrigo from the anti-nuclear movement on, and we're going to talk about this insane bailout for nuclear plants that's been stuck into the infrastructure bill, $50 billion. I mean, it's ridiculous. I have a piece up about it at Reader-Supported News. We'll come around to that. And a big part of the time, after we get through the upfront stuff, we're also going to have an update on the Georgia Miracle Project. We have Ray McClendon with us, Rebecca Landau also, and we may be joined by Steve Rosenfeld. So we're going to talk about Georgia and keep people updated on that. Talk about the California recall, which is quite amazing, actually. I got my ballot, by the way. I'm out here in California. And then we're going to go deep into discussion of the next week's program. Next week, we will not be on at 5 Eastern time. We're going to start at 1 Eastern time, which is 10 Pacific time. And we're going to be on for 4 hours. Actually, we're going to gather a half hour early just to get the technical stuff in line. And we'll be using a different Zoom link than this one. So you'll have to watch, and I will email it to my regular MailChimp list, which I'm sure includes almost all of you, if not all of you. And so it will be a different link, and it will be a different time next week. 1 p.m. Eastern instead of 5, and with a different link to 10 a.m. Pacific instead of 2 p.m. And we'll go for 4 hours, and then we will be talking about DC Statehood, election protection, the environment, Green Earth, and followed at the end by an hour on justice, ending homelessness and poverty. So it's a full 4 hours. It is the birth of the first national attempt using Zoom to pull together a national progressive coalition where we can effectively get out of our silos and into the streets and the suites and make a unified difference leading up to 22 and 24. God knows we need to. So we will be talking about that later in the hour. It is a monumental moment in American history. We hope to pull this off. Next week will be the first. And we have plans to carry that through the entire year. We will have at least 2 more of these Justice Roundtables, and we will have breakout sessions every month on these specific issues. So we'll go into deeper detail on that as we proceed. I do want to reach out to Jesse Jackson and his family. He's in the hospital with COVID. And I will say also from Arizona that the team that the Trump sent in to prove that the election was stolen. They all apparently have COVID. There's this news story about it today, and we'll return to Arizona later on. So let's start at the top. We're also going to talk about Pacifica Radio Network. There is a stolen election that we're dealing with there. It's instructive, and also Pacifica is an incredibly important institution that needs to be protected. So we'll have a moment on that. But we want to start at the top now with Joel SEGAL and the incredibly important progression of national legislation to protect our elections. We've been with this for a long time. These two pieces of legislation are definitely the children of the election protection movement. It is the HR 1, now technically S1, the For the People Act, which is an omnibus bill, and then the John Lewis Act, which was HR 4, which is the very specific to reviving the protections of the Voting Rights and Civil Rights Acts, and also how they're interfacing with the infrastructure bill. So Joel, the master of legislation, John Conyers, legislative aide for 13 years on the Hill. Can you give us the update on what's happening with this national legislation?
Thank you, Sluggo. Is Mark Watson here? He used to work for Mr. Conyers. He was supposed to be sharing my time. I don't see him. We got Mark? Do we have Mark?
I don't see him. So go ahead.
Okay.
Nope, just go.
All right, cool. Well, hello, everybody. Hope all is well. Due to the incredible grassroots pressure on the Congress by, longtime election protection organizations and NGOs and civil society, voter suppression and working on it is no longer going to be a backseat issue. What we're going to see happen with the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, I hope I got the name right, is the Democrats are coming back early in the House. I know the Rules Committee have already been debating how this is all going to work, but the House will pass a version of the John Lewis bill, but they're going to tie it on to the infrastructure bills, which I think is quite brilliant. Otherwise, it's very easy for voting rights legislation to get, pushed to the bottom. So it's expected to pass in the House. The question is, will it pass in the Senate? What this bill does is very simple. It restores the 1965 Civil Rights Act, which was decimated by the horrible decision Shelby versus Holder, which basically said that race was no longer an issue in politics. And, we didn't really need to have that kind of protection for Black and brown voters. Therefore, the Congress would come up with a new formula for preclearance. A disastrous decision, because once that decision was, decided, there was a flurry of voter suppression bills that transpired all across the country. Horrible decision. Well, now we have a chance to have preclearance again. All that means is, let's say where Ray McClendon lives, if the Georgia General Assembly wants to pass a law that outlaws pizza and hoagies when you're waiting in line to vote, they can't do that because they'd have to pre-clear it with the Department of Justice. And what's going to probably happen is that the battle will be in the Senate. There's only one senator, I think it's Murkowski, who has even signed on to restoring the 1965 Civil Rights Act. So I want y'all to really think about why we need this united coalition. Can you imagine being a senator and not really being bothered at all by the fact that state after state after state are passing laws to restrict Blacks, Native Americans, and students from voting? In the 13 years that I worked in Congress, I really never thought that I would see this kind of a national embarrassment. And what this means is that the Senate and the Republican Party, I'm going to be partisan here, and I know this is a nonpartisan effort, but I'm going to be very, no, I'm not going to be partisan. I'm going to be real. But I think the Republican Party is the most dangerous organization in the world. And the reason why is what George Wallace could not achieve when he was governor of Alabama, or even David Duke when he was the Grand Wizard of the KKK, the Supreme Court and the Senate are doing their work. So now you have Billy Bob Crow wearing a suit and a tie, making $260,000 a year, saying we don't want ethnic minorities to vote. So this is going to be a very, very close vote. We are going to have to think out of the box. We cannot leave voting rights to the politicians. It's going to have to be up to we the people. And whatever we have to do, whether it's civil disobedience, flooding phone calls in the Senate, with the people, everyone on this, Zoom call are going to have to call their senator. And I think progressive Democrats of America are going to be leading that effort. The NRA doesn't march, the National Rifle Association. You don't see them marching. They would call our offices for Mark Watson. There you are. They would call our offices so we couldn't even do business. But all I can tell you is that there's a very good chance that that bill will be passed if there's public pressure. It's going to be a much harder lift on the voting rights bill, the macro bill. But I really think what will probably happen is the Joe Manchin version will probably get passed, I think, in the Senate. And it'll probably have to be done through reconciliation. They're going to probably have to put some money or something attached to the bill. But Mark, do you want to talk a little bit about this? Mark Watson, former senior legislative assistant with John Conyers and former chief of staff on Capitol Hill. But Mark, can you tell us what's going on in the Rules Committee? Anything about the voting rights bills? Thanks.
Yeah, well, I think you've kind of covered the most important issues, Joe. Right now, there was some talk. In fact, the Judiciary Committee chair talked about the Voting Rights Act, and of course, Jim Jordan was there to counter Chairman Nadler. But the fact that you were talking about what's going on with the attack on voting rights, it's kind of interesting that there are 400 different laws, over 400 different laws nationally to try to water down our voting rights. But what I can tell you is that it's going to pass the House. The Chairman Nadler eloquently explained how the Constitution provides for the federal government to have the last word on all legislation having to do with voting rights through the 13th, 14th Amendments and the election clause. And so it's got, as you said, Joe, though, it will probably have face some challenges in the Senate, but it will pass. But as per usual, there will have to be a public uprising or a public clamor for it to pass, simultaneous to its debate through the House. And they're going to do that. As I said, right now they are, I was saying earlier, they're working on the rules on how, I think there's going to be a closed rule. Everybody here probably knows what that means, that there won't be any amendments allowed on the floor of the House. So it's going to probably pass the House very easily. It'll, as I said, get some kind of pushback in the Senate. But if we put this group together that you guys are putting together right now and brings the pressure that it's supposed to bring, that you guys can bring onto the Senate, it will probably pass pretty well. So
you're saying it'll pass the Senate, the John Lewis bill will pass the Senate?
It will pass the House, and it will pass the Senate probably in probably a bit of a watered down version. But once Joe Manchin and
Sinema
are kind of taken in the back rooms, and this is inside baseball talk. It will pass. They'll
But then
pass
where
it.
does the filibuster come in?
Well, the filibuster, again, what they're trying to work on is that carve-out rule. So I'm not really sure of if that's going to happen or not. No, I don't think that filibuster will be used to stop the bill from passing the Senate. I don't see that happening. So,
well, now also,
I really don't.
Is it possible if they attach the voting rights bill to the infrastructure bill, doesn't that then qualify as a money bill and only require a simple majority?
On the Senate side, I can't speak to that. But on the House side, yes.
Well, it'll pass the House anyway. It's the Senate.
Yeah, so that's not going to be a problem in the House. I can't really speak to the Senate side. What I can say, though, is that if with the pressure that you all are trying to put together and could bring to bear on the Senate side, any kinds of procedural moves like that could possibly be stopped, or can probably be stopped.
So actually, it occurs to me that maybe this national roundtable that we're doing next week, guys, and women should have a focus, an action focus on lobbying for these two bills. If we're convening a national gathering and we have these two bills out there on the table, we maybe need to really focus on getting the pressure necessary to get them passed.
May I ask you a question? Which two bills are you all talking about? The voting rights and which other bill?
The Omnibus for the People Act and the John Lewis Act.
I know the John Lewis Act, but what's the other bill that you're talking about?
The Omnibus that was HR 1.
For the People Act.
Okay. Well, okay. Right now, the Budget Reconciliation Act.
Yeah.
Is that something that you all are targeting or no?
Well, let Joel Siegel speak to this. Joel, come on.
Thank you, Mark. No, we're focusing on the voting rights bills. What I think is going to happen is the Manchin compromise on HR 1, which I think that's going to be the bill that will be passed. What both are going to have in common, I think both might be filibustered unless there's going to be a need. And Mark, this is where you can be very helpful. We're going to need Black celebrities and Black dignitaries and people of all backgrounds and races are going to have to shame the Republicans into passing both bills. But to break the filibuster, as long as there is a funding mechanism involved, and that's not that hard to do. You just have to write in the bill, paying for election monitors or something, right? Then that's when you could go into reconciliation, but you can only do reconciliation so many times a year. I don't think, right?
Twice. Yes.
Mark?
They're not, yes, once or twice. They're not going to take that bill into reconciliation in either house.
I think that's right. And so that's important that you've made that clear. I think the only way to get these bills passed is we're going to have to shame the Republicans in the Senate, put relentless pressure on them by people making phone calls. They really do make a difference. When you call a senator's office and speak to the staffer that's in charge of voting rights, they don't know if you're a Democrat or Republican. They just know that they're getting a phone call from a constituent. So a lot of people say incorrectly, well, it doesn't matter. Mark will tell you it does matter because every politician wants to get reelected. That's number one. Number two, there's going to have to be more media coverage and press conferences, and we do have access to dignitaries and celebrities. We need people like Jimmy Carter or former Republican senators or even W. Bush. They have to put pressure on the Senate. You can't do that unless you come at this with a lot of power.
That's very interesting that you mentioned W. Bush, because George Bush would be a good person to talk to, because I think in 2006, he signed the Voting Rights Act back into law in 2006. It was George W. Bush that did that and kept it intact at that time. It wasn't changed until 2013 after the Supreme Court ruling. And so, no, utilizing George Bush would be very good. And then, of course, the celebrities that you mentioned, and Barack Obama and others.
Well, go ahead, Harvey.
No, I mean, obviously what we need to do here is leverage our upcoming national call a week from today with a strong focus on getting these two bills passed.
Charles Moreland on Stack. Go ahead, Charles.
Go ahead, Charles. Charles Moreland, you got on mute. Charles, are you there?
I mentioned what I'm going to raise again back in early July.
Okay.
And I was told, no. We have to get these bills passed before the end of July, and we're going to do that. But what I suggested then, and I want to reiterate now, is this. First of all, if Joe Biden had made DC statehood the highest priority and passed it in the first 100 days, we wouldn't have to worry about the filibuster, because we'd have 2 more Democratic senators by simply making the District of Columbia the 51st state. And again, I say the way to get both these bills guaranteed to be passed, because there are going to be so many obstacles, many more than the obstacles we're going to have to statehood. We can get DC statehood, I do believe, if the District of Columbia citizens stand up and make a just demand. Ours, I believe, is the most noble voting rights movement, not just in the country, but in the world. Because when people are rising up all over the country, fighting voter suppression. When we talk about District of Columbia citizens, 712 citizens, we talk about suppression in the strongest sense, not just to cancel or sweep under the carpet, but suppression in the sense of defeat, vanquish, exterminate, disenfranchise. So again, I say DC statehood, not just for DC citizens, but for this country, ought to be the highest priority.
Well, and we will be having a section on that. You and Senator Brown, Senator Michael Brown is on, the senator, U.S. Senator from.
Having said that, Harvey, I'm going to have to go. We have many more meetings. I want to come on this Zoom meeting and thank everybody for contributions they made. And I put on the chat already, we need help, we need support. Every penny that you give will help. And I'm going to turn it over to Senator Brown to give the report on where we are with the Dream March.
Senator Brown, can you stay with us for a bit while we get through this call? Do you have to leave?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Brown is going to be convening the segment, the leadoff segment to next week on DC statehood. I do want to raise, while we're thinking about DC statehood, there are 2 other issues that people don't generally think about. One is that, of course, the rights of DC people to vote. The other, of course, is the balance in the Senate. But we also have to deal with the reality that if we don't have a state in the District of Columbia, we can't protect the Capitol building. One of the reasons that the January 6th attack on the Capitol building got so far is that DC does not have a governor and could not call out the National Guard. And we know these people are going to come at the Capitol building again. So it's something that we're going to have to raise in the elongated discussion of DC statehood. So we're going to come to you, Michael, Senator Brown. Let's get through the general discussion here on these 2 pieces of federal legislation, which are absolutely essential. Ruth Strauss, Lulu Friestad, and then Art Levine. Ruth?
Well, I just wanted to ask, I mean, I'd love to be, optimistic and not rain on a parade. But, what do we do about the, even if we pass this, We've got problems with governors. We've got problems with the Supreme Court. And we've got some blue dog Democrats in the Senate. So I wish I could be optimistic, but right now I'm not so optimistic.
Well, we're always optimistic, Ruth. We have activists like you in our camp, and we will not be denied. So let's keep at this and let's figure out how to win this. Lulu and then Art, Lulu Freestad, and then Art Levine.
Thanks, Harvey. I'm sorry if I missed this earlier. I heard Joel talk about the Manchin Compromise. Do we know exactly what is in the Manchin Compromise? Again, I'm sorry if I missed it, but I would love to hear the details of that.
It's a good question. Joel, what is the Manchin Compromise?
The Manchin Compromise, one of the things that the bill does is he does strip out most of the campaign finance reform provisions. But he does keep in the provision on reforming the gerrymandering. So it's not perfect, but that's probably one of the most important, provisions of it. It also makes sure that you can't mess with early voting. So it's pretty close to the original bill. It's just they're taking out anything that I think progressives really care about, like campaign, finance reform.
Weekend voting, Joel.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. In fact, a lot of very prominent grassroots activists like Stacey Abrams said she supported it. I know Barack Obama supports it, but other than the Manchin bill or his, I think he actually has a bill. I don't see any other way to get that bill passed through the Senate because, it's 50-50. Harris is the tying vote. But, the thing about if you can't do reconciliation, like Mark said, will it be filibustered? The answer is yes, it is going to be filibustered. If Manchin, though, starts having these powwows with the Republicans and there's public pressure, I still think there's a possibility that it can get, passed. But I think the John Lewis bill will be the most successful bill getting passed in both houses and signed by the president.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is the draft available? Have you seen it? Is there a link?
Hey, Lulu, if you Google Manchin Compromise on just Google it and it'll go through. There's been a few articles. There's like 4 or 5 bullet points. But when I read it, quite frankly, I was surprised. It was fairly progressive. And another thing that's interesting about the John Lewis bill, Manchin wanted to go much further than even the House bill. He wanted to have pre-clearance in 50 states, in all states, because the John Lewis bill in its current form is like, it's not as many states. It still gets the states where there's been the most voter suppression.
Well, it actually, Joel, if I may ask, you're absolutely right. It takes the states, it's the same number of states, which are 6, but they're different states. They're not all the same states because different states over the last 65 years have changed their laws in such a way that they are now requiring pre-clearance.
Thank you, Mark. That's right.
Okay, so
and I'm sorry to follow up, I'm still not quite satisfied. Do we know what happened to the election security provisions? For example, in the Manchin Compromise, do we know if the requirement that a voter be able to mark their ballot by hand is still there? What about the requirements for risk limiting audit funding? Is there any information available about that? And then I have one more about the reconciliation.
Yeah, I'd have to double check, but if you just Google the Manchin Compromise, it'll be in there. I think that was taken out, but I might be wrong.
Thank you. I'll look. And then regarding reconciliation, Emily Levy was kind enough to send around a letter from what was, I guess, is called the State Working Group, and it was a recommendation that there be included in the reconciliation funding. I believe it was $80 million to fund risk limiting audits. We had some reservations about the language because it reduced the risk limit, or it increased the risk limit from a 5% risk limit to a 10% risk limit, which I personally think it makes the audit kind of meaningless. But I do think it's worth noting that there is a group trying to get language into the reconciliation that could affect election security. And I thought it was a noble effort that would be good to get more energy behind. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. I also heard, and maybe you can confirm this, Joel, that Manchin was a wanted voter ID, but it was actually very loose voter ID. You could do it with a utility bill. He was not asking for photo ID. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, that's correct. I think one of the issues, though, about asking for voter ID, which they do, of course, in North Carolina, is the Republicans in the state legislatures, they never allot money so you can actually buy the ID or transportation to get the ID. I don't know if that's covered, but yeah, the Manchin bill does not require a photo ID.
May I also just add on top of that is that
Please, Mark.
anything that photo ID is going to pass, but what becomes a problem too is that you also have to have an address and the city and state where you live and so forth, and that seems to be the problem. It's just not the photo itself. That's going to go through, but it's the accompanying information, the other metrics that they're talking about right now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Especially Native Americans. A lot of Native Americans have P.O. boxes.
In fact, they don't have, yeah, exactly.
Right.
Have no addresses at all.
That's why we need this movement. We have to go much deeper and further. We can't blog our way to change or tweet. We're going to have to move towards the 60s tactics and of mass demonstrations, civil disobedience, taking over. I really mean this, Tiananmen Square, like, Wall Street takeovers. We can't use the same tactics when you're dealing with neo-Confederate white nationalists, Jim Crow radicals. These are extreme radicals. They're very dangerous. They don't care about democracy. They want to take, I live in North Carolina. I grew up with these people. They are very dangerous, and we have to meet fire with fire. They think they can roll over us because they think, and they're right, that we're too disorganized, and we're going to try to change that on August the 30th.
Okay.
May I make one other suggestion, Harvey, if you don't mind?
I'm calling Ray McClendon. He's texting me. He's got to leave. So
Ray left. It took too long.
All right.
Oh, I apologize.
No, that's not your fault. It's my fault.
Oh, may I just suggest that I get the doggone bill from the Judiciary Committee on the House side, and I could probably get the bill from the Senate side, whatever they're doing over on the Senate side, although they're not really doing anything right now. But I can get the bill from the Judiciary Committee like that. And so we can know exactly what we're dealing with in terms of the nuances that need to be considered. Does that sound like a good suggestion?
Please.
Okay. Well, we're rolling along here. Art Levine, and then Xavier. Art Levine.
Going once, going twice.
Okay, Xavier. We'll come back to Art. Xavier Figueroa.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. My mom's in the living room. What I was saying was, my question is, okay. Question is, oh jeez.
It's okay, Xavier, man. Just chill, relax, go for it.
Okay. Question is, even though the Manchin compromise budget passed, House Democrats like Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, this is what I'm listening on TYT, they're going to block the bill. They just need like 6 progressives to vote against the bill in the House, and then also the Blue Dog Democrats. So it's just going to be deadlock onto deadlock either way. And
well, there's no evidence that the squad.
I wouldn't worry about that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't worry about that.
Having worked with Nancy Pelosi,
right?
Mark,
don't worry about that.
She demands unity, and if not, you're in big trouble.
You're in big trouble. Yeah,
I don't see that happening.
There's no problem there.
Yeah, I just want to say
something we have to be concerned about.
I just want to say something real quick about that. Be wary of bloggers and YouTubers stirring up controversy. That's what they do. Right. They get clicks and hits and donations, and that's their job. They got a job to do. But Nancy Pelosi's been at this for a year or two, And when she has a priority like this, she gets it done. There was talk about denying her the speakership, and Jimmy Dore, the less than stellar predictor of politics, predicted that they were going to force a vote and all this other stuff. It didn't happen. And he's been throwing a 10-month temper tantrum ever since. So,
well, that never was going to work.
Right.
So the people, Joel and Mark, work there in Congress day after day after day. They know what's going on. These bloggers and YouTubers, with all the best intentions in the world, they're hilarious comedians, a lot of them, but they don't have the experience and they don't really know what they're talking about. So don't be troubled by what a YouTuber says.
Okay, we're joined by Dennis Bernstein from KPFA in Berkeley, one of the great commentators on public radio. Dennis had technical problems last week. Mike and Steve, can you make sure that Dennis can hear us and that he can speak if he wishes to?
Hey, you forgot me.
Hold on, Jeffrey. Dennis Bernstein, are you on with us? Dennis Bernstein?
I think I got you, Harv. Yes.
Okay, great. All right, very good. All right, Jeffrey, go ahead real quick, and then we're waiting for Art Levine, who raised a hand, but we haven't been able to get him. Jeffrey, go ahead.
This is for Mark Watson. How about it? I wanted us to suggest a few more people to add to that list, like Bernie Sanders, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Leonardo DiCaprio, those kind of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reach out to them and bring them in. We'd love to have it.
For me, it's easier said than done. That's easier said than done. It's not like I have a phone.
Okay.
Have their direct phone number.
Okay. Good suggestions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I will say that Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm sure most of the people on this call are aware, has actually been probably, definitely one of the most effective advocates against gerrymandering. He is responsible in many ways, for the very good districting commission that we have in California. And he was also instrumental in bringing one into Michigan. So if we can, in fact, recruit Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll be glad to have him on any call we do. In addition to which, his son is a student at the University of Michigan, as Steve Spitz and I are alums. Art Levine, Art, are you clear to speak? You've asked to be recognized. I'm asking to unmute again, Arnold. Art. Okay, all right, so let's proceed. Is there anything else we have on these two federal bills that are so important to us?
I want to say that one other thing about Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
He's a very smart man, just like Pelosi. He's going to do everything within his power to stop any kind of filibuster on this bill. And there's going to be a lot of backroom bartering going on. So don't despair. I think the bill will pass the Senate. And it won't be as watered down as Manchin wants it to be.
Well, are you saying that the Republicans are going to step back and not filibuster and allow this voting rights bill to go through?
To a certain extent, they're not going to be as strident as they would normally be. I will say that. As
my mother used to say, from your lips to God's ears. Let's just hope that. Well, more important, what can we do?
Again, as I said earlier, you know what it is, and I don't have to tell you, Harvey. You've been doing this for a long time. You have to bring out external pressure to bear on these people, and it has to be not only calls, but it has to be, public demonstrations and so forth, and celebrities involved. And we can put that together, but it has to be now. It has to be over the next month.
You mean like LeBron James?
Yeah.
This has to be a focus of next week's national call. This will give us a tangible thing that we can really focus on and make a difference.
It's real simple, inside and outside pressure.
That's right.
It really is. That has not changed.
I just put the link into the chat where you can, with one click, you can send an email to your senators, and then you'll get a follow-up email on how to phone call them. because they need to feel the
may I say
pressure.
something, Mike? That's great, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to leave the meeting, and I appreciate you all listening. You know, having worked for Joe will tell you, a lot of times the calls are important, but a lot of times staffers don't even relay what the cause to the member. So, you know, more important than just calls, I think, is, you know, external pressure, physical presence, you know, civil disobedience. That really works. I mean, you know, what Extinction Rebellion does, for instance, that stuff really works.
I'm going to make one clarification because, Mark, you're absolutely right. But the gerrymandering process is already beginning in the states. And unless the Senate acts like this week, and that involves them having to come back into session, then the states are going to draw a whole bunch of convoluted maps that are going to lock in Republican rule in a lot of states on the federal and the state level. So we need to act right away.
Yes.
And if you can get down to your senators' offices and stage a sit-in, there are people who are working on that. That's a great idea. We're going to have to do it. But right now, I think the first thing we need to do is get their phones ringing off the hooks.
That's true.
And if they decide not to further that information on to their member of Congress, their senator, then chances are they're going to get in trouble because we're going to make sure that the phones are ringing off the hooks. We're not going to give them an opportunity to dodge us.
Yeah. Make sure they're ringing off the hooks, Harvey.
Well, Harvey,
That'll be one of our tasks for next week, Joel.
it does start, Mark is right, it does start with the phone calls, the emails, but there has to be press conferences.
Yes.
You have to shame the Republicans into doing the right thing. When we were stuck on global AIDS through the Black Caucus, we brought in Bono so we could pass relief to Africa for global HIV/AIDS. No one thought we could do it. We brought in Bono. We got to Colin Powell, and then Bono prayed in the White House with George W. Bush, and we got $15 billion for global HIV/AIDS prescription drugs. I led that effort. So the reason why I'm a little bit more optimistic is because I've done this before. I'm not doing this to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying that we can't be in the mindset, the Republicans are in power, they're going to do the filibuster. Our job is to bring out the voice of the people, but you got to shame these people. And the best way to shame them is to get African-American leaders, especially those who marched in the 60s or the 70s. You get business leaders, artists, get Quincy Jones, basketball players, football players, and be in the press, write editorials. We don't have that coordination because we're going to have to go old school. I also believe that you got to bring hundreds or thousands of people into the Senate. I did this with Reverend Barber when our wonderful former Republican majority leader was going to gut Obamacare. We blocked the halls of Congress for 3 days. We got arrested. We're going to have to go back to those tactics. That's a democracy. You get arrested, you pay $50, but if we don't use those kind of tactics, I fear the worst.
And one other thing, and I really will be finished. There are these three bills that Biden is trying to get passed now: the infrastructure, the Voting Rights Act, and the big Democratic plan. Those we really have to kind of focus. I would suggest you guys focus on making sure that those are successes first, because his credibility is really being challenged right now with what happened over in Afghanistan. So those have to be three big wins, what's going on in the Rules Committee right now. And those other wins in the state houses will be a little more easy to tackle if we get these big wins here on these three pieces of legislation.
Let's do it. Next week's National Coalition call, that'll be a major focus. We've got to win these three bills.
Got to win them.
There are problems with the infrastructure bill on the nuclear issue that we'll discuss. Art Levine, we've been waiting for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I missed the editor to call me back. So I wanted to ask you a question. It's presented, as I heard it, was that the hope was that the John Lewis bill and possible, and tell me, this is a question and then a comment. So as discussed previously at the beginning part, the hope is that both John Lewis and the AS1 will be somehow attached to a funding bill and pass through reconciliation. Is that the current hope for both bills? Or, and that's the first question. Is that the current hope and strategy? Or is the hope to, as someone said earlier, that we can quote,
Okay, that's a good question. Let's hear the answer.
Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, good question, Art. Well, what we're saying is that the John Lewis bill has a better chance of being passed than the Manchin compromise bill, the more macro election protection bill. I was just throwing out the idea of reconciliation as a way to bypass the filibuster. But what Mark Watson said is that you can only use reconciliation a certain amount of times per year. But whenever you're working in legislation, this, Art, you got to use the art of legislation. So if you got to use reconciliation and be creative and put a little funding stream in there, if that's, that is not the Democratic strategy. In fact, I don't even know what the Democratic strategy is, because they're not reaching out. In my opinion, they're not reaching out enough to the civil society, the grassroots, celebrities, dignitaries. That is one of the mistakes that they make time and time again. That's why we're going to have to form our own kind of like a grassroots Congress and go meet with them. They have to go further than they have. Right now, we're being held hostage by the filibuster, which is why we need to eliminate the filibuster. We can't eliminate the filibuster unless we have a mass movement to eliminate it. And there is no mass movement, but that's what we intend to create.
And let me just add, is that the budget reconciliation, here's the thinking. The budget reconciliation bill is tied to the infrastructure bipartisan bill, and the Voting Rights Act is on its own. But what they're trying to do is pass them all around the same time. We don't have a lot of time before the end of the fiscal year. We only have to the end of September, and all this has to be done before then. So they're trying to get all three of these things passed. The reconciliation bill, which is the big one everybody wants, with child care and 2 years of college and so forth. I've got other things, other people across the country, big churches around the country is working on that. Voting rights, and then infrastructure. So those are the three things that they're working on right now. And what the Republicans are saying is that they're holding the infrastructure bill hostage to their budget reconciliation bill, which is what most progressives want or say they want. Okay, but the voting rights bill is the John Lewis bill is by itself, but part of a 3-part big package.
Okay.
They're doing the rules on today. Go ahead.
Okay, Senator Brown, did you want to jump in on this? I'm sorry, we lost Ray McClendon. Are you able to stick with us, Senator Michael Brown?
Well, Harvey, I have a 6 p.m. meeting with veterans, so I'll just have to say a parting word. And of course, we're 100% behind you on the idea that the filibuster needs to go. The only path for statehood right now is to eliminate the filibuster, remind Senator Manchin that he's a Democrat, and get our friend from Arizona, Sinema, to realize that the people of Washington pay taxes and fight in wars too. So the filibuster is key for us. But I appreciate all of you that are on this call tonight. And I want you to understand, as Charles has already pointed out, the biggest single act of voter suppression in America today is 712,000 citizens from the District of Columbia who do not have a voice in their own national legislature. So anything you can do to continue to support us is very much appreciated. And please know that we stand with you on the For the People Act and the John Lewis bill. And anything we can do to facilitate that, we certainly will. And
well, you are in DC. You have the home field advantage.
And I've been arrested, so I'm not opposed to it.
And I think it may be very much time to start talking about that. Maybe we should set a date certain when we should have some sit-ins and find some organizations that will help organize some people to do that.
Well, certainly my office would be happy to help coordinate that. And we've done it in the past. We used to do it actually every Wednesday. This was years ago. We would have a protest on Capitol Hill and get arrested. We haven't done that in years, but we've all done it. I was arrested in front of the Senate, actually went to trial, and we very much believe in civil disobedience and
well, let's set a date certain. Maybe some of you other folks might have a better idea when a date would be. 2 weeks. Do we have 2 weeks to set something like that up, or what?
Well, we're in the middle of doing a march, setting up a march.
Yeah, I'm here in DC also.
Month, right, but I think a few weeks after that, certainly we could arrange it. I think most important for us in arranging it is to look at the calendar in the Senate, because we've already passed a resolution in the House. We've already passed legislation in the House, and decide what the most appropriate time to take that action is. When I first started, a very wise man told me, "Don't get arrested on Capitol Hill if nobody's going to notice." So
that's right.
We need to find a time that's appropriate to get the most notice. But yeah, I'm happy to work on that as soon.
Sooner we set a date, the better. The more we can get done.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Okay, and thank you.
Senator Brown, thank you for being with us. George Ripley, thank you for jumping in on that. Remember, next week, Senator Brown will be co-convening a whole segment on DC statehood. And, those of people who think it's an issue that doesn't affect them, just ask who's going to call the National Guard the next time these fascists come at the Capitol building, and how are we going to get out of this dilemma with the filibuster? Justin LeBlanc, Dorothy Reich, and Molly Basler. Justin, real quick. Justin, you with us?
So I don't know if Tatanka has mentioned this yet, but
your audio is bad. Justin, you got to deal with your audio. Your audio is not comprehensible.
Oh, shoot. Hold on. Let me turn on now. I got muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I do want to jump in. Those of you listening on the Progressive Radio Network, we are about to go off recording. If you want to proceed with this call, as we hope you will, go to electionprotection2024.org, find the link and rejoin the conversation, or find the full, you'll be listening to this on Thursday, find the full recording at electionprotection2024.org and then continue listening in. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next week on the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness Show. Justin, then Dorothy, then Molly. And then we're going to talk, if Diane D'Arrigo is still on the phone, I want to talk about the nuclear aspect of the infrastructure bill. Justin, go ahead. Okay, we're having trouble with you, Justin. That's no good either. So we're going to have to work on your audio somehow, see if you can work it through with Mike or Steve. We'll go to Dorothy. Dorothy Reich, we'll come back to you, Justin. Dorothy Reich, Molly Basler.
I am totally confused. PDA is saying, and Mike Hirsch is saying, and Alan Minsky is saying, if we don't pass these voting rights bills now, the gerrymandering will kick in and it's all over. it doesn't matter what else we do, we can do all these other things, but the die is cast if we don't stop the gerrymander. Are we going to be able to stop these maps once they're drawn, or is it over?
That's a good question. Joel, do you have an answer for that, Joel Siegel?
Well, I mean, gerrymandering has been going on for a long time.
Not what's going on now. This is going to be a total, absolute disaster.
No, Dorothy, I'm going to try to answer your question.
Okay.
Is that the only way to mitigate if these bills don't pass is to do what they did in Georgia, because in Georgia, they drew maps too unfairly in the state legislature. But because of the Georgia Miracle and the 19 NAACPs and Stacey Abrams, because they got the vote out through relational organizing, they were able to mitigate gerrymandering. And that's why that's one of the most important projects that we're doing, is to teach the Georgia Miracle to organizers in the swing states, because yes, it's always going to be a problem if we can't reform gerrymandering. At the same time, you can always reintroduce a bill in Congress. So if a bill doesn't pass, there were plenty of attempts to pass the 64 and 65 Civil Rights Act or universal health care. We just have to keep at it. So I'm just, in terms of the die being cast, our job is to make sure that, we just keep fighting back. But yeah, we need to do what we can now, but relational organizing, massive GOTV campaigns, funding people. The biggest problem in terms of the campaigns like Georgia or in South Carolina in the Black community is they don't have any money to get out the vote because the Democratic Party does not give them money, which is what we want to do, is start a foundation, raise money to pay these organizers to get out the Black vote, especially in the rural areas. We can't let the Democratic Party decide elections anymore.
Hey, Joel, if I could just real quick jump in on what Dorothy was raising. Everything that you're talking about is necessary, and everything you're talking about is going to be much more difficult because of the supercomputer-driven, high-tech gerrymandering that they're doing these days. So Dorothy is correct. This is going to be the worst round of gerrymandering that we've ever seen. And let's not find out what it's going to be like if it goes into effect and try to fight it. Let's try to fight it now before it goes into effect. And I'm going to put the link into the chat again, where you can click on that link. You can contact your senators, both of your senators, and we can try to get filibuster either eliminated or a carve out for voting rights legislation, and then get as much good voting rights legislation through as we can, because it's a whole lot easier to prevent a mess than clean up a mess.
So Mike, what's the deadline that we need to get these bills passed by to avoid the new maps actually being set in stone?
It's a horse race, and it changes day to day. These people in the various states were raring to go. They had the maps pretty much drawn up, and they're probably just wrangling now, fighting over which rich donor they want to have in their particular district. It gets as petty as that. So while we do have a little bit of breathing room, we're not going to take anything for granted. We need to get in touch with our senators now. We need to, what Joel and Mark were both saying, they worked under the Capitol Dome. They know what gets results. We need to turn the pressure up to 11, as they say in Spinal Tap.
Okay, Molly Basler.
Yes, hi there. Thank you. I just wanted a quick question, Joel and others, in regard to the civil disobedience, which I love to do. I mean, we have to start meeting then. We've got to start gathering, wear our mask, and get out there. It seems that we say this and then we're not doing it. I mean, I see a lot of groups, animal welfare activists out marching in person, live. Climate crisis protests are going on, but nothing about the Democratic Party, even for the recall. And I just think we have to be careful with the Zoom thing, because sometimes it gets comfortable to not meet in person. And we got to do what's right, not necessarily always what's comfortable. We got to get out there. I mean, if we want to march, we have to do it.
Molly, I agree. I think what's happening next weekend, the I Have a Dream marches that are being organized by the large organizations that have, like the National Action Network, they have capacity. But even the police, the Capitol Police, are telling the activists, we don't really want you here because of the Delta COVID variant. But all that aside, we can't do what you're talking about unless we have coordination. So what we're trying to do on the 30th is get leaders, and this is just the beginning, so we can start coordinating everything together. So it's not 7 or 8 very well-intentioned groups out of DC or New York. Thank God for them, but they can't do it, by themselves. And then we have to get funding, right? A lot of times there's a lot of great ideas, but there isn't enough funding. So when you begin coordinating marches and civil disobedience, it's easier to raise the funding. But I agree with you that we have to begin that kind of planning stage.
Right, and even small groups, though, it's important. I mean, a group of environmentalists camped out at Dianne Feinstein's office, things like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a grand, it's small actions create big actions. So I just think, even the Capitol Police, of course, they're going to say not meet and march on the Capitol because they don't want to deal with it, but we've got to finally just do it. And yeah, there's always going to be something, but we can wear our mask. And if we're outside, what is the fear?
Well, and also you're bringing up a very good point. You can do local actions in front of for example, if there is a senator or a member of Congress that opposes these voting rights acts, you can do demonstrations, but it needs to be coordinated so it's not just a flash.
Absolutely.
Of course, so let's start coordinating.
Buana and then Rebecca Landau. Buana?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you so much. So I got to meet John Lewis in 2018. Rest in peace, John Lewis. So I'm glad there's a bill named after him. He fought for voting rights, for 60 years. So we have to do him justice. But at the same time, I think to attract minority voters and attract minority support, it needs to have a clear plan and a clear idea of why they're going to benefit from the voting rights bill. I don't think it's being communicated other than it's against the democracy, what Republicans are doing. So that's just what I wanted to say. We need to really explain to minorities in Atlanta, Georgia, and everywhere what's really going on. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Buana. And where are you? Where are you located?
I'm in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. All right. Be careful.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Rebecca Landau, and then Tatanka, and then Justin.
I just wanted to speak really quickly to my understanding is that Christine Pelosi is also running a tight ship on the KDEMs, read the recall. And this is a swing. This is coming back around to the idea of civil disobedience. I know there's a lot of energy for that, but let me tell you, I'm a station location manager for primaries for presidential candidates. And you want to do some real activism, 3 to 5 people in an office. And this is coming from like some of the best federal lobbyists with a group behind them. That's great. But right now, the civil disobedience we need is knocking on doors, whether that's rural Georgia or California. I am telling you, like, the Republicans are on the ground. They are training and they are knocking on doors. So when we talk about civil disobedience, it's one thing to sit in an office, but I really would like to dovetail with what Buana is saying is put your some of you at least, please join me, put civil disobedience into knocking on doors and talking to people and explaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Much appreciated. And your work has been outstanding. And we really appreciate you being on the calls as well. Tatanka, and then I have Myla Reason. I missed Myla. Go ahead, Tatanka, please, and then Myla. And then Justin.
I love this conversation. It just underscores why we're doing a national roundtable and how important this coalition is of progressives. And all the small actions, I want to repeat, are really, really important. I want to, one of our national senior consultants is Dolores Huerta, and I worked with her my whole life. And she, with all the cynicism that was going on, the Dolores Huerta Foundation with Vecinos Unidos, that's, Neighbors United, all up and down the Central Valley of California, which is known there as the Selma of California, Bakersfield, California. They put on masks. They went out there to get all the people they could to register in the census, right? And you remember all the fear around, especially Latinos registering for the census. Even with everything that they did, and even with everything the Republicans are going to do to try to frustrate this, the bottom line is the Central Valley of California came up with 2 more seats that we can elect Democrats to. So, you just do what you can. And she also has a favorite saying, just when we think we've lost, we've won. As long as we leave it all out on the line, there are things that may happen on the inside out strategy. We have no idea now. We just have to leave it all out on the line. I appreciate what everyone said, and tell everybody about this National Justice Roundtable. It's going to be the thing that's going to endure this moment on DC to create a movement over time. And thank you for Harvey and Joel and Ray McClendon and Charles and everybody that really are giving us the opportunity to do that.
Hey, Harvey, are we going to be able to show the flyer?
Yes, let's get Myla Reason in, then we'll show the flyer. Myla, did you have something you want to say? And then put up the flyer as you go.
I do. Thank you for Harvey. And Tatanka, as a point of personal privilege, I'd just like to tell you that when I was volunteering in Delano with the farm workers in 1965 and 66 during the beginning of the Great Grape Strike, one of the things I did was work in the daycare center and take care of Dolores's children who were young at that time. So, that was many years ago, but that's not why I raised my hand. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah.
I raised my hand to respond to Dorothy's question about gerrymandering being locked in before we can respond to it. And I certainly don't want to in any way undermine the effort to act now, because it's much easier to prevent these things than to remedy them after the fact. But Mark Elias, who has a pretty good record with the democracy docket, is claiming that he will be able to prevail in court against any illegal gerrymandering, and that's the key there is illegal, because who knows, these things can be appealed, etc. But he's claiming to be confident that he will be able to overturn any gerrymandering that's passed by Republicans. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Let's certainly hope. Thank you for that, Myla. Here's the flyer as it stands. We're going to be adding more pictures, more people, but this is for next week's a major national roundtable on justice and DC statehood, voter protection, election protection, and the environment. And this is the beginning of it. We're going to put in more people, but this we can use. You can send around. There will be updates as we go along. The National Coalition, the National Justice Coalition Roundtable begins at 1 p.m. Eastern Time a week from today, Monday. It'll be 10 a.m. Pacific, and we're going to have as many people come as we possibly can. I want to thank especially Joel Siegel for the tremendous amount of work that he's put into this. Does anybody have any questions or comments they want to make on this? I see we're joined by Alan Minsky. Alan, you want to jump in and talk about the gerrymandering Dorothy Reich has asked about, and also about this flyer? I see your face down there with all the other white boys. So what do you got?
Yeah, no, it's the great photography of Mike Hirsch. I believe that was taken outside of, I want to say, AOC's office.
Okay.
Back when you used to be able to go up on Capitol Hill. So I just want to say this about the partisan gerrymandering per Milo's point. Yes, anything that's passed by Congress becomes the law of the land. And it's going to be pretty easy to make this, at least on the first few volleys, insulated from Republican attacks in the courts because it's going to play off of the ruling around Pennsylvania. And so partisan gerrymandering was declared by the courts needed to be legislated, to be made illegal. That, you know, racist gerrymandering illegal, partisan gerrymandering remains legal. Got to pass a law in Congress to outlaw it. The problem is it's very likely that if they don't move quickly, yes, they can be reversed for the next election cycle, but not this election cycle. And that is because what will tie them up will be the rights of candidates to know the districts they're running in. And once they're declared, and of course, anybody who declares it before the legislation is passed is within their rights to do so. So let's say Ohio passes their gerrymandered districts, all the Republicans launch their campaigns, they're all going to be poised with lawsuits. And the likelihood is that they'll stick for this cycle and not stick for the next cycle. So it has to be done ASAP. To me, it's very dispiriting that Schumer allowed the recess to occur because of this time frame. As I've said on this call the past few weeks and working with Mike Hirsch, we've just been, you know, blitzing our PDA membership to call into their senators, ask them to come back from recess and proceed with what Schumer has promised will be the first thing that he'll do when he returns, which is pursue the passage of the voting rights legislation, with the understanding that the time frame is pushed forward because of the need to address partisan gerrymandering, only perhaps not enough in time. And then this is just a different political point, but why is it so significant that, you know, you don't want to lose the House of Representatives for even one term, let alone the state legislatures? But think of it in terms of American domestic policy and even macroeconomic policy. There will be no fiscal spending in any Congress if the Republicans control the House by one vote, none whatsoever. None of what we're seeing right now, 4.1 trillion, there'll be no prospect of continuing it. Similarly, on climate legislation, it's 2 years we can't lose and we'll lose them. I mean, that's not quite as cut and dry because the executive orders can cover to a good degree, but they can't cover on spending and fiscal policy. And so this whole break with neoliberalism that's occurring because of the heavy progressive fiscal spending that we're about to see passed, you know, if it is popular and it proves non-inflationary, they can re-up in the next 2 years. And that would really then set a marker and we'd be breaking away from neoliberalism. The public will have an appetite for progressive fiscal spending. That'll be broken if we lose the House. And the Democrats are not acting like they really want to win the House yet. I'm sorry, I'm still profoundly disturbed by their inaction. So that's what I wanted to say.
All right, thank you, Alan. And we are, Alan is the executive director of the Progressive Democrats of America. Very, very key to this whole effort. We still have 53 people on the call. Very quickly, I do have, as I wanted to rush in real quickly and talk about the infrastructure bill. I have a piece at a reader-supported news. The infrastructure bill does include a shocking $50 billion bailout for existing nuclear power plants. And I always raise the nuclear issue for a wide range of reasons, but one is that one of these reactors can blow up. And God forbid if one of these reactors blows up, that we won't be talking about voter rights or anything else. We're going to be talking about bare survival. Diane D'Arrigo was on the call earlier. I think she's gone. Diane, if you're here with us, chime in, please. But look at my piece at Reader Supported News. If you guys can dig it out of the invite and put it in the chat, that would be very helpful. But before we proceed with this infrastructure bill, that $50 billion for existing nuclear plants has got to come out. It's outrageous and unsustainable and extremely destructive. Imagine what $50 billion would do putting windmills in the Great Lakes. We could very quickly start to support, to provide the power for all the cities around the Great Lakes, Buffalo, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, with wind power from the Great Lakes if we had that 50 billion, not for nuclear, but for renewable energy, which is exactly where it needs to go. The other thing is that we do have a crisis at the Pacifica Radio Network, which Alan Minsky is well familiar with. We have won an election to instate for the first time bylaws that will allow the sane operation of this incredibly important radio network. Zach Caldvere is with us. He's running for the board at the KPFA in Berkeley, which actually is a functional station. We had Dennis Bernstein on the call earlier. Dennis, if you've come back, let us know. Alan Minsky was the greatest program director that KPFK in LA ever had, and we have a faction that's absolutely destroying the Pacifica network. We defeated them in a public election, and they came in and are engineering a stolen election, very similar to the kinds of things we used to see in the Soviet Union and in third world countries that are being taken over by the CIA. So email me directly if you are interested, if you can help with the Pacifica fight. And Zach, if anyone is in the Berkeley Bay Area, Zach, can you jump off and tell us real quickly about your slate of candidates for the KPFA board, and also how people can support a New Day Pacifica?
Sure. Thanks, Harvey. I just posted in the chat our website, which is kpfaprotectors.org. Generally speaking, I think there's about 25 candidates running for 9 openings. And we have a slate of 8 candidates as KPFA protectors. Generally, we support the New Day bylaws. We support keeping independent, objective news program, which KPFA is the only one of the 5 that still has one. We support paying pensions to staff. So we have a detailed platform that wants to basically protect KPFA from some of the same kind of mismanagement and malfeasance and undemocratic policies that have taken place at the national board and that's taken over some of the other stations in the network. For the reasons that Harvey has outlined, we believe protecting KPFA is absolutely critical to the progressive movement.
Well, he's 100% right. And we won this election among the listeners and the staff at KPFA, KPFK in Los Angeles, and KPFT in Texas. And yet this entrenched junta is denying the election, and it's as ugly as it gets in the world of election protection. And so I hope people will plug in. I'm at solartopia@gmail.com. If you want to write me, if you're in a Pacifica service area, please email me with your support. And if you're in the Bay Area, please support Zach and his slate for the Pacifica board in the Bay Area.
Hey, Harvey?
Okay. Yes, Joel?
Sorry to interrupt you. I just hope that everyone who's on the Zoom and been with us for a year can push out our flyer. We're going to make the changes in the flyer, send it out to the list. But if you can send it to 10 people, 20 people, we really need a good showing, because we have a lot of national leaders and even global leaders who are going to be on the Zoom roundtable. They need to see participation. So I think Mike is going to send out the flyer. You may have already said this, I might have missed it, but I know we need like PDA to send it out. There are a lot of leaders on this call, and they have their networks, and also to really participate, because this is for everybody to be part of this Zoom event. But we got to make sure that maximum people know about it.
Absolutely. So I will put out a MailChimp mailing tomorrow.
Thank you.
With the flyer. And as a follow-up to this, and everyone else, please take Joel's words to heart. He has been doing an incredible job pulling this roundtable together. We will focus, among other things, next week on these 2 bills and see if we can make them a flagship accomplishment to help get them through. Art Levine, then Justin, if you got your audio fixed, and then Ruth Strauss. Art Levine? You with us, Art?
Going once, going twice.
Okay, we'll go to Justin. I hope you got your audio fixed, Justin.
I hope so too. Does this sound better?
Yeah, go ahead.
Great. So I'm going to have to engage in something that's a little bit of heartfelt generational side of things in order to really hit the point home on this. But so I graduated at the time of September 11th. I was actually slated to go into the U.S. Air Force Academy. And then when I saw what happened with the Patriot Act and everything else, I totally flipped script. And I actually started going out on highway overpasses with signs saying, end unnecessary war. And so, you know, if anybody wonders about my credentials in being progressive and civil disobedience, that's where it starts for me. I'm now connected with Dolores and Tatanka. But here's what I want to say about all that before I jump in with them. And that is, my generation, you can only push on us so far with the world's going to end, the world's going to end, the world's going to end. Before we already know that the world's going to end, we need a solution. And so I've been talking with Tatanka and Dolores, not only about going out on the highway overpasses and holding signs, because we only have 3 weeks before the governor is under threat to get kicked out, and then California gets locked down from all of its progressive action, but to actually convince people that progressive action is the way to go. And so what we're working on right now is beyond just the national level and these Hail Mary pass legislation. We want to do some additional Hail Mary pass legislation in California for a Green New Deal, but to actually get it sold, we're working on concerts for compassion, living wage to end climate change. People actually have jobs, that they will be able to sustain themselves. They will have unions to protect them. They can stand up for their neighbors. They can actually do things as a community again, rather than just be isolated and have to say, well, you know, I could go with my 10,000 people out to this location and protest, but I'm not convinced things are going to change. We have to convince them that they will change. So that legislation combined with the anti-recall petition, combined with we actually want to build a community around not only concerts, but at these concerts be promoting a union economy and a green economy. We have a holistic package. We need to actually coalesce around that package.
Sounds great, Justin. Thank you for that. And I'm really glad you didn't go into the Air Force. We're glad to have you with us on these calls. I want to call on Hetty Tripp. Thank you so much. Hetty Tripp, you haven't spoken today?
I just want to make sure, Harvey, and I'm sure you're going to do it, but those voting act, the bills that you put out, make it really clear so that when we call our senators and congressmen, we know exactly what we're saying. Because I've heard so many things here, it's a little confusing. So just
Joel, can you speak to that directly, Joel, to Hetty? It's a good point, Hetty.
Well, put it down in writing in your statement that goes to all of us.
Yeah,
because those are the action points.
If you go to the link that I just posted in the chat again, it'll walk you right through the script that you need to make a call. First, you'll send an email, then you'll get an email in return, which will walk you through step by step what you need to do.
Okay, I see it there. actionnetwork.org. Letters filibuster carve out the ban gerrymandering. So look, Eddie, I'll look at that there in the chat. I think I might put it up there, the link we need. Are you good with that?
No, I want the bill numbers. Is it there? I don't see it.
Are the bill numbers in there, Mike?
This is a very special situation. We're asking for the senators to come back into session and to vote on a filibuster, to abolish the filibuster or to reform the filibuster. So there's no specific bill. There is a script. That's the best we can do.
Okay, thank you. That's clear.
All right, we'll repeat that next week as well.
And Hetty, thank you for that question, because people would not have known that, and we didn't mention it before. So thank you for bringing that up.
Great. Okay, very quickly, Art Levine, we're almost out of the recorded session here. We still have 52 people with us. Art Levine?
Yeah, what, in terms of this event, the social justice thing, the big event you're having?
National Justice Roundtable next week.
My question,
it's today. It's a week from today, on August 30th, but it's from 1 to 4 Eastern time, 10 to 2 Pacific.
I understand. My question is, what is the exact Twitter handle? Because a lot of activism and journalists follow Twitter, and I get as much as 300,000 interactions of stuff that I post on Twitter per month.
That's a great point.
What I want to know is precisely the Twitter handle, and make sure that you have a few Twitter-friendly hashtags worked out and things like that. I have no idea what they are. My Twitter handle is ArtL7. So in any initial tweets, try to copy me, because I'm pretty effective, at getting attention to things that I tweet out, and I'm just a private citizen. But
yeah, that's a great point, Art. Very good. Mike and Steve and Joel, we need to come up with a Twitter avenue to help promote this. It's a good point, Art. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Joel, did you want to add something before we go out of the recorded area here?
No, that the reason why we're having our committee meetings is so we can do, this is great, like what Art is saying, but yeah, Twitter, we don't have one yet, but we will tomorrow, because we have 1.5 people working on this.
So Laura Chamberlain has asked, when are we sending out the flyer? We need it ASAP. Is it linked? That link you sent, do we have a link that people can go to get the flyer? Is it at the grassroots, is that emergency, is it election protection 2024.org? Can we put it there? Can we put the flyer, Steve Caruso, can we put the flyer at election protection 2024.org? Steve, you there? I can see you're on the list. Okay, well, we'll deal with that. Very good. This has been Julie Weiner. We didn't get to talk to you about New York. Also, California, all you Californians, I actually got my ballot. We got to vote on this recall thing. And I predicted Gavin Newsom will win, but only if we vote for him. So, or vote to stop this recall. The recall is just an anti-democratic scam. As someone pointed out, when Schwarzenegger ousted Gray Davis in the recall earlier in the century, Arnold actually got more votes than he did. That's not going to happen this time. So defeating the recall has a lot to do with protecting democracy. This has been the 62nd Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition call. We have 52 people with us after an hour and a half. We will kibitz for another 20 minutes in what we're going to start calling the lasagna section, because that's what we were going to serve at the when we were going to do the coalition building moment in a church. But it's now Zoomed, so we have another 20 minutes here just to chat. But this is the end of the recorded session. Thank you, crew in New York, and we'll see you next week in Solartopia.
Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from